once you wake up the dead, you've got a real mess on your hands.
Cat Dead podcast later. Hello, and welcome to the Bomb Squad Matinee. I'm your host, Ethan Hawker, returning after a several months long absence. And with me I have...
I am Tanner Richard Kraft.
Hi, I am the world's worst security guard.
And today, we're going to be discussing Stuart Gordon's 1985 H.P. Lovecraft adaptation, Re-Animator. Before we get into it, I'm plugging something, because I was on another podcast talking about Stuart Gordon. Two other podcasts, our friends over at Giant Robot FM, discussed the film Robot Jocks, and for part of that, they did a history episode discussing Stuart Gordon's work in theater and his first three films, which are, Re-Animator, From Beyond, and Dolls, before discussing production of Robot Jocks, and I was on both of those history episodes. So go check those out. They're pretty good. I had a really fun time with them, and they're great. They've guested on our show before. Check out our episodes on Pacific Rim and Macross Do You Remember Love? But that's enough shilling. It's time to get into the meat and potatoes of this one, and I'm going to launch in with the first question here, which is, for you guys, what is your favorite Lovecraft adaptation? Tanner.
Okay, this was kind of a tough question because I'm not as, obviously I'm familiar with Lovecraft and his work. I'm very familiar with a bunch of dumb jokes people make about his cat on the internet, but I'm not as familiar with adaptations of his work. At least not as familiar as I'd like to be, because I think his influence on that sort of existential's not the right word, a cosmic horror. I think he's almost like one of our godfathers of that sort of genre.
He actually hated the Italians.
In the sense that once... So I should be more familiar with his work, especially because I'm intimately familiar with space, the one place untouched by capitalism. And I had to literally look up the Wikipedia article for Lovecraft adaptations, which is how I found out perhaps my favorite Nick Cage movie of the last 5 years or so is a Lovecraft adaptation, The Color Out of Space, which is a super, super awesome. It's a great Nick Cage performance, and it's a great horror movie that really gets under your skin. It has a lot of incredible visuals, I think. It reminds me of Annihilation, except I didn't like Annihilation that much, but I love The Color Out of Space. And that's all I'm going to say about that, because I think the less you know about The Color Out of Space going into it, the better. But I'll say that it's a brilliant movie. It's directed by the guy who got kicked off of doing The Island of Dr. Moreau. Something Stanley, I think. Richard Stanley, maybe?
So.
And it was his first feature film since getting kicked off of directing that movie. And
he will not be making any more movies.
Yes, that's true. I also found that out today. The incredibly credible assault accusations. Did not know that before today. So, but don't let the actions of one bad person sully the work of the incredible cast and crew of The Color Out of Space. I can't recommend it enough. I think it's streaming somewhere. I'm not sure where, but yeah, probably on Shudder. Like every horror movie is on Shudder. So I recommend it heavily. It's a great movie.
Yeah, that's one I've always wanted to see. Slightly dampened by that news, but no, that is interesting. Color Out of Space adaptations are there are not insignificant number of them. There's a pretty good movie from 1987 called The Curse that I remember seeing way back when, that I remember relatively fondly, actually, which as I'll get into in my discussion of my own favorite is kind of a rarity for some of these. But Tim, what's your favorite Lovecraft adaptation?
So my actual answer to this question is this here movie we're discussing on the pod today. The first one that came to my mind was Color Out of Space, but I kind of figured Tanner would pick that one. But that one is a solid picture. Obviously not my number one Nick Cage movie of the last few years, but it's up there. It's up there. Has the same editor as Mandy. A lot of the same crew.
Oh, it does?
Yeah. It was released by the same company, too. But yeah,
I did not know that.
Good movie, good picture. I know specifically it's the same editor because when I went to see it in the theater, there was like a Q&A video thing afterwards, and Nick Cage specifically shouted out the editor, which I thought was really fucking cool. Nick Cage, cool guy. Way cooler than his uncle. Anyway, favorite Lovecraft movie other than those, I would probably say John Carpenter's In the Mouth of Madness. That one's very good. Really captures that sort of cosmic, like incomprehensible horror thing that Lovecraft is known for, and it's sort of the final act of Carpenter's Apocalypse trilogy, which started with The Thing and then had Prince of Darkness and then In the Mouth of Madness. All good pictures. The Thing is obviously my favorite of those three movies, but In the Mouth of Madness is also very good. And then one shout out to The Evil Dead, which is not an adaptation of Lovecraft's work, but is very heavily influenced by it, has that same sort of cosmic, incomprehensible horror thing with like the evil that's chasing after everybody, and the Necronomicon obviously borrowed from Lovecraft's work, so there's a lot of influence in there. So that's sort of my favorite Lovecraft adjacent movie, but favorite straight up adaptation probably, other than this movie, In the Mouth of Madness. Back to you, Ethan.
Yeah, In the Mouth of Madness is that is an interesting one. What I haven't seen in a very long time. It's interesting too that you mentioned The Thing, because that's sort of kind of adjacent to a Lovecraft adaptation in that it's adapting Who Goes There, which itself was heavily inspired by At the Mountains of Madness. So legally speaking, if somebody said The Thing, I would have wagged my finger, but ultimately accepted it, not ejected them from the call immediately.
Unless it was me, in which you
for the bit, Tanner. It's important. And I wouldn't do that because it would mess up the order of our videos.
No, Ethan is still wanting revenge for the time I kicked him out of the Discord call during a Fairly Odd Parents video game stream.
So my favorite Lovecraft adaptation is Innsmouth no Yakata for the Virtual Boy, the first-person horror game.
Holy! So speaking of video games,
not actually. I've never played. It looks interesting, but no, that's a bit. My favorite one is probably actually Re-Animator, ultimately, but close second is director Stuart Gordon's immediate succeeding film, From Beyond, which is quite good, maybe not quite as good as Re-Animator, but it also features Jeffrey Combs as the lead, kind of enjoyably. Barbara Crampton sort of fills the role as the Herbert West of that movie, which is fun. She gets to be the scientist and also dress up in leather. Very cool. And Ken Faree is in it, and he gets a very silly death in that movie, which I like. It's great. It's dripping in all the things you love in a horror film, which are lots of ooze that looks kind of translucent and mucousy and really gross, and bisexual lighting, which are both incredibly important.
Let's go.
Very significant to the strengths of your horror film. But beyond that, I think that one plays. That one's more explicitly Lovecraftian, more pulling on a story that's like a fantastical device that opens up new worlds and that sort of thing. Re-Animator's an interesting, kind of different Lovecraft work to pull from in a lot of ways. And From Beyond feels more like a Lovecraft movie on top of being just indulging in more like science fiction trappings and that sort of thing, a bit more explicitly, which is cool and fun. Good movie. We might talk about it sometime in the future if I feel like making you. But moving on to the actual subject of today's episode.
Mr. West, I'm actually glad to see you.
You'll never get credit for my discovery. Who's going to believe a talking head? Get a job in a sideshow.
What were you guys' overall thoughts on viewing, things that stood out to you, and how the film holds together? Let's start off with Tanner.
Okay, so unlike you two, this was a blind spot of mine. I had never seen Re-Animator before, right, Tim? You had seen it before, correct?
Oh yeah, several times.
Yeah. I am a big horror fan, but Re-Animator, it sort of escaped me. Even though I starred in a film that heavily is inspired by Re-Animator, at least in
Diagnosis.
part. Yeah, Diagnosis. No. And I remember recording a line of dialogue for that movie that literally references the dead cat details later bit. What a marvel this movie is. What a incredible picture. Really, I feel like I could go on and on, but like, first off, the performances across the board, perfect. Jeffrey Combs is so great as like this sort of mad scientist, but also as the movie goes on, I find to be a much more nuanced and sympathetic character than just mad scientist. And I can get more into that in general discussion. The guy that plays Dan, whose name escapes me right now, I'm sorry,
Bruce
what was that?
Abbott, a different Bruce from Evil Dead.
Bruce Abbott. Thank you. When I saw him, I assumed, wow, how handsome, and he's great in this. Surely he had a huge career. When his IMDb photo seemed to be a behind-the-scenes photo of one of the Re-Animator movies, I lost hope at his career being that big. The guy that plays the Dean, the guy that plays Dr. Hill.
Yeah, Robert Sampson and David
who's
Gale,
truly,
respectively.
Yeah, Gale. He is great, and I know I've seen him in other things. I just can't think of anything off the top of my head. The cast, across the board, incredible. The actual plot is really engaging. The idea of, like, you know, we can bring people back from the dead. I feel like that's sort of a common, like, a trope to explore in fiction, whether, especially through the horror lens, but often in the not so horror lens. You know, some really fascinating, it's a fascinating lens to explore. I didn't realize how really good the humor of this movie would be. I expected it to be funny, because it's I thought a quote unquote cheesy 80s horror movie. It wound up being way more than that. Funny, I laughed so hard at dead cat details later, I had to pause the movie. That was so goddamn funny. I lost my shit. The gore, all the effects, incredible. I don't know what kind of budget they were operating with. I have to assume it was a small one.
900,000.
And if it was they stretched every goddamn dollar. I tell you what, every cent is on the screen, especially that climax with all of the like zombie going crazy. Oh my God, it's incredible. But the most surprising thing about it for me is, well, yes, it's sometimes sort of just using excuses, the classic gratuitous nudity that these type of horror movies can be known for. I thought the love story between Dan and the Dean's daughter, who I only saw this 2 days ago, and I'm already forgetting names. Thank you, Megan. Okay. Thank you. I thought the while it was a little basic, I thought it was really well done and really anchored the movie and grounded it in a way that I think a lot of horror movies of this era aren't quite as grounded with. While at the same time, while that love story at its core is crucial, there were several times in the movie I was convinced Jeffrey Combs, which, oh my God, Jeffrey Combs, so good. I know I talked about it earlier, but I need to say it again. He is so good. I know he's legendary for being in a bunch of Stuart Gordon movies and being a horror actor in general. I know him best for playing The Question in the Justice League Unlimited cartoon from the mid-2000s. That's my pull there. He's so good. There were multiple times with the way Jeffrey Combs, Herbert and Dan were interacting that I was like, Herbert's gonna lay one on him. They're gonna fucking kiss. There were quite a few moments that I was like, this is some gay shit going on right now. Like a lot of movies in the era, it's questionable how intentional or unintentional that might have been, but it added a little bit of flavor there. Overall, I think it's a great comedy, a great horror, a great hootin' and hollerin' time. I didn't mind that the streaming service I found it on played 4 1-minute ads every 10 minutes after the first half hour, which that is fucking insane. I had to watch 4 minutes of ads for every 10 minutes of movie. And despite that, I loved it. That is an unideal viewing experience. It was a frustrating viewing experience, especially around the 70-minute mark where it showed me 6 1-minute ads.
Jesus.
3 of which were different teasers for Terrifier 3.
Fuck.
In conclusion, great movie, surprisingly great romance, great humor, great horror. It's great. I fucking love this. Major blind spot of mine that I'm really glad I filled. Back to you, Ethan.
Yeah, it is pretty exceptional. I think, particularly regarding acting, we'll discuss that a bit more in general discussion, but it's very much demonstrates Gordon's background because he came from live theater,
And you can tell. You can definitely tell.
Yeah, a decade and a half at this point of directing that as much as anything. And putting a lot of these productions. He was the founded Chicago's Organic Theater Company, and he did a lot of really great work with his actors. Famously, or in the commentary, he mentions that actors are the best special effects, which is true. Because even when the effects in this one are a little cheapo, like the cat puppet is probably the standout example. Their performances really carry that whole scene as much as anything, which. Really remarkable. I think, broadly, it's a really exceptional film, and I think, particularly, you mentioned Barbara Crampton's Megan was really good, but also her father, Robert Sampson, as Dean Halsey. That's really interesting, because there's an interesting story about that that I'll get into in discussion, but I want to plant the seeds for that later.
Foreshadowing.
Yes. We're developing the podcast. We're adding narrative dimension to our.
In like 30 episodes, we're gonna add flashbacks. It's gonna be crazy.
It's just like when they invented movies.
We're working backwards to just reinvent movies.
Pretty much,
here.
yeah. Tim, what were your overall thoughts on the film?
So, as you guys know, I have been doing a annual October 31 Nights of Horror marathon. This is my 10th consecutive year of doing this, and Re-Animator was one of my first time watches the first year that I did this back in 2015, and I would say it's probably my second favorite first time watch from doing any of these. I was gonna say my favorite, but then I remembered House was also a first-time watch from one of these, and that one's just a little more special to me. But this
fucking
one
love
is
Hugh Laurie.
Shut the fuck up, Tanner. But this movie, very good, and I actually got to see it on the big screen last year, courtesy of Late Night Grindhouse, and. As you were alluding to, Tanner, there's lots of hooting and hollering, and this is a great movie to see with a late night crowd. Like everybody's laughing at the right parts. Just a lot of great energy in the room for this here movie. Very fun time. Like you were saying, lots of great performances. Stuart Gordon fucking killed it as director. Jeffrey Combs is fantastic as the iconic Herbert West. Barbara Crampton, great as Meg. I once again forgetting the actor who played Dan, but he plays a really
Poor
great
guy.
Poor guy. For real though, he does play a really great straight man in this gay movie. I do appreciate his character, because like it's interesting how he is the lead of the movie, but Jeffrey Combs is like the star, which is interesting. But like I think they're both very good, and I'll probably get more into in-depth stuff in general discussion. But like it's just a great movie. Brian Yuzna is the producer of this movie, and he went on to direct the sequel, Bride of Re-Animator, which is also a very good time. Tanner, you were kind of talking about how crazy the climax is, and like when Brian Yuzna is attached to a project, you can expect a memorable climactic set piece, and boy, is this one of those. It's fantastic. Absolutely love it. Just as soon as all of the fucking body bags sit up, it's just like, oh, it's going down. It's so good. Love it. Love this movie. Enjoy it every time I watch it. And I'm sure I will continue to enjoy it on further viewings in further Octobers. But I'm going to pass it back to you, Ethan.
Yay. Yeah, well, this movie owns, and it is sometimes a little difficult to articulate exactly the specifics why, just because it carries you through so easily. It does not feel its runtime at all, which is like already a pretty modest runtime, to be clear.
It's like 83 minutes. Yeah. I watched the Last Drive-In with Joe Bob Briggs episode on it earlier today, and at one point he mentioned that apparently the original cut of the movie was 2.5 hours. And I guess they just cut like a whole subplot of Dr. Hill being a fucking hypnotist, which is like the explanation for a bunch of things. And I'll be honest, I think we're better off without it.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's little remnants of it there. The very initial rough cut was like a little over 2 hours. I want to say like 138 minutes. Brian Yuzna mentions it on one of the special features. We'll get into it, but most of, if not all, the extended scenes are readily available on the Arrow Blu-ray, and also a lot of them were reused because when this film was originally released, it was released unrated. Before, for a video release, it was given an R classification, and to do that, because it would have just gotten an X rating, there was too much explicit content. They added in a bunch of the old like plot scenes for previously, and honestly, I wouldn't mind like an ultimate cut with those reintegrated, because I think they're all pretty good, including one that's...
I think a version of the movie like that exists. I was reading about it on Wikipedia the other day.
Yeah, I think there might be one or the other. It's certainly, maybe it's an exclusive for like the Arrow Video Ultimate, like limited edition release. It's certainly not on their regular one. Like it's not they're not regularly integrated, but they're available on that release. There might be some fan project or like a UK release or something that I'm unfamiliar with.
Sorry, it's a German Blu-ray release that has what they call the integral cut, where the extra stuff from the R-rated version is incorporated just wholesale into the unrated version, creating a 105-minute version of the
and honestly, those scenes are all good. I'm not opposed to the integral cut. I kind of recommend checking it out. It's got a real good gay scene where they have sex.
Gay,
no,
say.
Where Herbert West recreationally takes the reagent, and so he's having trouble getting his fix. So, Daniel has to help him has to put in the reagent for him, and it's a very charged scene. It's really good. It's really good.
No homo.
No homo, of course.
full body.
But no, I think all those cuts bits are quite good, but maybe not the full 2-hour version. I imagine some of that was probably a little redundant. It was his first time making a proper feature, even if he had a couple of projects behind him at this point. But my own overall thoughts on this one are going to kind of mirror your guys. I think it's really exceptional. Combs absolutely steals the performance, but Crampton also establishes herself as a really, really good scream queen here. They're cheap and kind of funny looking at times, but I really love Dr. Hill, like in general. His performance is spectacular. But also I love the headless man sort of special effects they do for him, where suddenly he gets way taller because it kind of works.
I do love when he has the like model head on him and his arms are just fucking Swedish chefing it. It's great.
Real good. That really useless security guard is always very funny. He's always looking at boudoir. I kind of wish they gave something a bit more crass, like jugs or something, but as is, it's still pretty funny.
He's got to work for it.
Yeah, exactly. God, that man shirt is so tight on him when he bursts into the room. It's like way too tight on him. I don't know why they gave him such a tight uniform. It's really weird. But no, the movie's really good. It's really buoyed by its actors, who all put in exceptional performances. We didn't stress it very much, but there is something that's still pretty absurd and kind of resonant about the head giving head scene, as they call it, towards the end. What was that look for, Tane? Many such cases. But it's that's still a really good bit. Dennis Paoli, the writer for this film, reportedly called Gordon up in the middle of the night and said, "I just invented the first visual pun." And it's like, no, you didn't, Dennis. That's completely incorrect. You did write a pretty funny idea, though. And it's nice that
I just invented jokes.
Yeah.
Guys just made up this new thing. It's called jokes. We're gonna take the world by storm.
And then,
that's how Seinfeld was.
And then I presume Stuart. I presume Stuart Gordon went. Dennis, please do not call me at midnight ever again. Because that is the correct response. But the movie's just really exceptional. It's doing a lot with a little to do a lot of good stuff, and I'm sure we'll get into some more production staff and that sort of thing in the discussion section, because there's a lot of minutia to talk about. But overall thoughts are that it remains very strong, very funny, and perhaps Gordon's best film. But it's saying a lot, because despite the fact that he didn't get to do as much as he'd like, his movies remain pretty consistently excellent despite his limited means throughout much of his career. And this is a really exceptional start from someone who already had a really prominent and exceptional background in other creative spaces. But it kind of devolved into it a little bit, but let's get into general discussion moving forward after this ad break.
Break time.
Welcome back from the ad break. I hope you're feeling revivified after whatever
Fuck you just call me?
whatever garbage YouTube wants to sell you. Here's some more not garbage. We want to sell you. Do you like movies? Do you like colors? Do you like the color green? Well, there are probably some movies with the color green in their palette. MoviePalette.com features such palettes. We got two of them on screen today, one behind Tanner from Punch Drunk Love, and one behind Tim from the film Mandy. So if you just go to MoviePalette.com, you could get yourself one of those. They're a nice, sort of elegant kind of art piece for that sort of thing. And if you use the code SQUAD15, you'll get a 15% off of your order total, which can also help because if the movie isn't there, you can request a custom-made one based on whatever film you enjoy. So definitely check that out. But let's get into general discussion, gang. Leading us off, I wanted to talk very briefly about Stuart Gordon's previous work, just because I think it's interesting in that he started the Organic Theater Company in 1969. So, he's a relatively old person for a first-time director of a feature film, he had briefly worked in television, like this mid-60s, early 60s, late 60s, and then he had a couple other projects before this. Bleacher Bums, which he produced for PBS, which is an adaptation of his of a stage play that the Organic put on, which was it's about a bunch of Cubs fans at a Cubs-Cardinals game, which is especially relevant to us as Middle Westerners. Very amusing. I actually watched that in preparation for the Giant Robot FM recording, and it's annoying and grating in a way that accurately represents probably what going to a Cubs game in the mid to late 70s was. It's
Don't worry, it's still like that.
Yeah. It also notably features Joe Mantegna in it, in a very, very early sort of performance. That's the first thing he ever directed, technically. But he also did a bunch of other really cool, interesting stuff. He got in trouble because he did an all-nude version of Peter Pan very early in his career, which got him in legal trouble, but also kind of put him on the map. So, it's worth being a bit iconoclastic. And he also, before this, notably, partially what was the inspiration for Re-Animator was the 1984 CBS sitcom ER, featuring George Clooney and Mary McDonnell. It lasted for one season. It was a spin-off of The Jeffersons. It was originally a stage play, but they just kind of retrofitted it into being a spin-off of The Jeffersons.
I love that this ER show has been brought up twice on our show. The first time being the Up in the Air episode.
That owns.
I'm gonna forget we brought it up
It
again.
owns. It's so good.
Don't worry, we'll do it a third time.
Then I'll remember.
Yeah.
But yeah, Stuart Gordon's a really incredible director. Beyond that, ER kind of served as the foundation on top of his love of fantasy and science fiction. He did a really cool sounding science fiction stage play called Warp that I want to take a look at. And beyond this, Re-Animator. Beyond Re-Animator. Haha. Yeah, that works. That's the third movie.
Got him.
Let's go. He did.
Still haven't seen that one.
It's all right. It's pretty good. I think it was technically a sci-fi original movie, and it is probably by far the best sci-fi original movie by a considerable margin. Tanner, you know about it because of the Move Your Dead Bones music video by Italo. I think it's an Italo house act. It's in a bunch of.
Move your bones.
Yeah, you got it.
Bones, move your bones, bones. I fucking love that song.
Yeah, that's what that was made for.
Oh, that's awesome. I didn't know that.
Yeah. He did another other really good movies from Beyond, which I quite like. Dolls immediately after that, which is the gift and curse that gave us Puppet Master, sort of. Robot Jocks, which owns, and you can listen to me discuss this with Giant Robot.
Shut up, you shill.
And he conceptualized, did a bunch of pre-production work, but didn't direct Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. A thing that he eternally regretted, which is a shame because I think his version would have been quite good. I think Dolls, of all things, is a really good indicator of that. But he went on to do a series of interesting films that never quite got him where he wanted, and eventually he was able to do the Re-Animator musical, which is really cool. I'm glad he was able to revisit this. It's apparently would have.
I've heard the musical is incredible.
Yeah, it has a splash zone for the gore in it, so that's how you know it's really true to the source text. I know there's a really great bit in one of the commentary tracks where they're talking about the sheer quantity of blood used for this movie, and then he's like, oh, and then I talked with Peter Jackson, who'd just come out with Dead Alive, and he said, and I asked him, how much blood did you use in that? And he said 300 gallons. And so, I guess that's progress. And I love that that's the way.
Thank you, Peter.
It's so funny. I think it's particularly relatable to us in the sense of he sounds extremely like somebody from the Middle West. When talking, he's a very big, bald guy.
You keep saying Middle West. I have never heard someone call it that before the start of this recording.
So you've never read Vonnegut?
No.
Read Vonnegut. It's good.
Is Vonnegut, which one is he?
Kurt Vonnegut. Sirens of Titans, Slaughterhouse 5.
Wait, I've read Slaughterhouse.
Yeah, Slaughterhouse is good. He calls it the Middle West in
Calls
that?
it the Middle West? Oh. I guess my brain just scanned past it.
Breakfast of Champions.
And I said, what about breakfast at Tiffany's?
Stuart Gordon's a really cool director who we unfortunately lost in early 2020, who leaves behind a really cool legacy. And I kind of wanted to put it in celebration of him. There's a really good memoir on him as well by FAB Press that I highly recommend. As well as a bunch of interviews. But the Re-Animator is a really exceptional sort of first effort. It's really a blessing and a curse when your first movie is arguably your best. But it's only because this one is so good. So let's talk about it a little bit more. Let's talk about performances. So what did you guys, any standout performances or standout moments from the performers in this one?
Jeffrey Combs in general. Again, I know I said it, I went on a tangent multiple times, but I can't emphasize enough because obviously the way the character is written is meant to play against your expectations because the way the movie sort of opens, Herbert West is seen clearly as the mad scientist, probably going to be the antagonist when we're introduced to Dr. Hill. He seems like a mostly normal person. And all that happens that Herbert West just accuses him of plagiarism, which I was inclined to just not believe or think was just some weird shit or whatever. And then as the movie goes on, Herbert becomes arguably the co-protagonist with Dan, and Dr. Hill becomes the flat-out antagonist. But I think Combs imbues this sort of warmth within Herbert, this humanity that I think maybe a lesser actor wouldn't have been able to sort of inject in there. There are these lot of like little subtle choices. Like I think he clearly cares about Dan, wants Dan to be okay. He doesn't want to hurt anyone. It seems like, yes, he's sort of selfishly driven by this mad pursuit, but his mad pursuit seems to have some origins and good-naturedness almost. And I think a lot of that comes from the way Combs plays him, which is fascinating considering apparently the only reason he agreed to do this is because he thought nobody would ever see it.
Yeah.
And I think it's truly the versatility, the multitude of his performance that I think adds a lot to this picture. It would have been a lesser one if he just sort of played it straight, but there's a lot of subtleties there that I think is really incredible. Because again, I can't emphasize this enough. I just figured Herbert West was going to be the villain. The poster makes him look like the villain. At least in this movie, I don't think he is.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's this, like, a very specific energy that he kind of gives to it where, like, yeah, at first he does kind of come off as villainous, and especially with the bit with the dead cat, he says that the cat suffocated under a jar, but you're just like, that motherfucker's lying, he's doing some shady shit. He is doing some shady shit, to be fair. But
he is, but I do not think he killed the cat.
I absolutely
no, he
do.
didn't.
Because it's meant to be a reference, sort of, kind of, to the short stories where he eventually does go to murder someone.
Death of the author.
I choose to. I don't know. Cats are pretty stupid, but I don't know if a cat could knock over the trash and jam its dome in the pickle
could
jar.
do that.
Yeah, you can, but you're dumber than the average cat, Tanner. Let's be honest here.
Listen.
Tanner Richard Kraft, dumber than the average
Tanner
house
Richard
cat.
Listen, I have a cat. She can be pretty stupid. It'd be like that sometimes. But yeah, I mean, at first, you just think he's nefarious, and he is kind of a little shit, but in a good way. Like, it is always very funny seeing him antagonize Dr. Hill, just a bit with fucking snapping the pencil every time he's trying to talk. Yeah, very good performance.
Brain death brings about an irreversible conclusion. We all want to retain our personalities in some idyllic afterlife. We all pray for some miracle. Perhaps, though, it takes something else. Perhaps it takes...
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really an incredible performance. Especially for like a big first role too. It is interesting that Jeffrey Combs kind of, I think, captures in the source text. There's an emphasis on him being like blue-eyed and kind of fair, like looking ageless. Which I think is partially why he injects the serum into him. I think that's in that extended scene. It's not the proper feature. I think it's meant to kind of align with that. But he's also, just kind of a forever twink, which is funny. And especially in this movie, very young Jeffrey Combs. Not that he ever looked bad. He still looks quite good. But it's very amusing, especially when compared to Bruce Abbott's Dan Cain, who's, very traditional, like square-jawed, big guy. Like handsome lead. I think the contrast is what makes it work really well, as much as anything. I do think there's an interesting sort of product of maybe a little bit of Gordon inserting himself, but I really like the interactions between Dean Halsey and Megan after Dean Halsey's been turned. I think particularly while Dean Halsey's in the asylum, and by all accounts, Gordon, a big thing was his father actually passed away when he was fairly young, and he would have dreams about, his father coming back, and one of them was like him coming back as sort of this deformed corpse, but like he didn't care because he got to be with his dad again. And he kind of injected a little bit, because Megan is a completely original character because there are no women in Lovecraft world. So the fact that they got to have that interaction, and that it's a sort of semi-autobiographical element, and their relationship is genuinely quite sweet. And I think it's really incredible what Robert Sampson is able to do with the character, like even under the makeup and being kind of a gurgling freak who we're made to not like all that much. He's able to earn a lot of sympathy back and convey a lot in his pantomime, which I think is incredible for this guy who looks like he's destined to be cast as a Republican in everything he's in.
Yeah.
Very funny. Apparently he left set one day, still in the makeup, and had to stop at the gas station, and the attendant went, "Are you okay, man?" And he said, "I'll be fine, I can get through this," and then just checked out. Very good.
Me on the set of The Other Side, which was just our college, just covered in blood. Everybody just coming up to me, just like, "You all right?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm all right. How you doing?"
I absolutely love so much like stories of actors just like staying in the makeup and just driving themselves home from set. It's always the funniest fucking shit.
I know there's a story about, I think, Ivan Ooze in the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers movie where he got injured on set and they had to take him to the hospital. But he was completely, like, it was a relatively minor injury. But they had to take him to the hospital in full costume, so they just rolled Ivan Ooze in on a gurney, which is very...
That is very funny, but like after learning the conditions of Saban in the 90s and hearing injury on Power Rangers set, I assume the worst.
Yeah, no, completely understandable. But in this instance, it was not a bad thing, and by all accounts, he had a really incredible experience on that film. So shout outs to Paul Freeman's Ivan Ooze. Purple and Ooze are more associated with From Beyond, but I think it's still relevant here. As our on-set accidents, actually. If we ever talk about From Beyond, that'll be fun.
So we were talking about the Dean character, and this was something that came up in the group chat too, and it was something that Joe Bob specifically brought up, which is like, you don't hate the Dean because he expelled Herbert, and you don't even hate him for like being a jerk about who his daughter dates. You hate him for rescinding the student loans. That shit's fucking evil.
Yeah.
He's like, your student loan will be rescinded. And I'm just like, oh. Ain't no way, man. Medical school in this country?
Yeah.
Well, like, and even just like back then in 85, you just see the look on his face and he's just destroyed by those words.
Yeah,
that'll ruin somebody's life.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that is the other thing that's kind of what I miss about the hypnotism subplot just a little bit, is because I think it makes him a little bit more sympathetic. It also that's a weird thing. It's supposed to kind of explain the reason that Dr. Hill is able to move without his head being connected to his body, and why he's able to control the other bodies. That is a direct reference. Getting into it briefly, the original source text for this. This one, it's not a straight adaptation, really. It's a gay adaptation, as has been mentioned many times. No, for the most part, it adapts, like, it kind of pick and mixes elements. It largely ignores the third segment of the story, which is the one that is the most racist.
Good.
H.P. Lovecraft, deeply racist man.
The other segments are still racist, but less so. But that's the one where it's most close to the text. But it's funny because it's mostly about like anti-black racism, which is bad, terrible. But also he's racist towards Poles and Italians.
What the hell?
It owns. It's an old-fashioned kind of racism towards people that we don't really think of as being able to be racist against anymore.
It's crazy. There was a time where like Tim, 100+ years ago, you, an Irishman, was considered not white or some crazy shit. Racism is insane. So beyond the obvious, like, bigotry is bad, racist ideology is like absurd.
It is actual brain rot.
Throwing down truth bombs. Racism. I thought racism was a tragedy, but it was really a comedy.
Bomb Squad Productions is taking an official stance. Racism is bad.
9/11 was
is
bad.
No, you look.
9/11, the jury's still out on that one.
You really like Jeffrey Combs as Herbert West. I don't think you can claim to not be sexist, because that is a man who hates women. That is a man who is deeply misogynist.
Okay, but like he hates women in
He hates women in a fruity way.
he hates women the way like some gay men hate women. That's how he hates women.
Yeah, and
it's still sexist, but it's different. You know what I mean?
It's ancient Rome sexist.
yeah. Jesus. Okay.
Something towel boy.
Yeah, no, yeah, the source text is interesting. It's maybe a little bit more gay, in the sense that there are no women, and he's like a live-in, like, long-term assistant, because it's serialized over several years, and that. What's worth mentioning is that the part of the intent, beyond, kind of cribbing from a lot of the medical research for ER, is that a friend had commented on the fact that there had been a lot of, I was going to say Dracula movies, vampire movies specifically.
There are a lot of Dracula movies, though, to be real.
That is true.
Sorry. This is an aside. My friend told me the funniest fucking story the other day, which is when I don't know what movie they were seeing, but the Nosferatu trailer played. And, in the new one in that trailer, they
pointed
say,
at the screen and said,
they build up all this hype.
Max Shrek.
No, I'm not kidding. Like, it was like, it's Nosferatu. It says Nosferatu. They say Nosferatu in the movie. The Nosferatu title card pops up. And this person loudly leans over to their date and goes, Dracula. So, you're not wrong, but...
In Spanish, Nosferatu means we ferratu. Quick lesson for you.
You ferratu.
No, there's still more episode. Let's talk about the special effects in this. Any sequences that really stood out?
They're great.
Any particular bits that stood out to you?
I liked the cat puppet.
I mean, yeah.
Maybe it's just the actor selling it, but I really dug it.
In fairness, I think it's good that it's not convincing, because I don't want to watch like a realistic representation of a cat being killed.
Yeah, we don't need the fucking necromantic shit in this movie. I think the one effect that just stands in my mind the most is Dr. Hill post-decapitation. Just the whole thing with the tray and the body. That's just a good effect.
Yeah.
I think the bulging eyes in the opening scene is that like kind of like made me go, ugh.
Yeah,
that was really effective.
Eye stuff is pretty rough too. I totally get that. Yeah. Interestingly, I think there's I think it might be a gurney that they put Hill on, that are just a medical tray, surgical tray, that he sticks his head through. But apparently that gurney was actually borrowed from the Return of the Living Dead, because it had already had a hole put through it.
Let's go.
Brian Usna mentions it early on.
Great movie.
Return of the Living Dead is another really good one, funnily enough. Inside Baseball, I think, Tim, when it was between Re-Animator and Return for next year, or this year.
Yeah, I'm wanting. I was wanting to host one of those for like Halloween next year. So I guess we're doing Return of the Living Dead next year. Tune in,
Surprise!
Folks. It's gonna be great.
I really like, in terms of the effects, there's a lot of good ones. But I kind of love at the very end the weird like intestine explosion, because it feels appropriate that for a Lovecraft, like.
I forgot, that shit's crazy.
Yeah. Oh my god, I completely lost the plot of... Okay, moving back. This is a Frankenstein movie. I wanted to make that clear. This is a Frankenstein movie, and Herbert West is the Frankenstein. And I say that because his friend, when they were talking about vampire movies, Gordon replied, well, they should make more like Frankenstein movies instead. So he sourced this. And yes, it is a Frankenstein movie, Tanner, because it's about a man who creates life, and he's ultimately the protagonist.
Sure.
It's Frankenstein.
I didn't watch the sequel, but the sequel seemed to be a much more literal, with like putting the pieces together.
Well, I mean, like, it's kind of the combination of factors that makes this work. It's a Frankenstein. Yeah, it's a Frankenstein story. He make guys. He make man.
He make Frank.
He make Frank.
It's true. He make Melvin.
Yo, Frank!
Jesus Christ.
One of the zombies should have been like really normal, really chill, and his name should have been Frank. Like while all the shit's going on at the end, he should have just been in the corner, like eating a jar of cheese puffs. Like,
I disagree.
I do want to bring up a fun fact regarding the zombies. The first guy that they reanimate, the big buff guy, that is Arnold Schwarzenegger's stunt double.
Yeah, I was going to
yeah.
mention that. Yeah, it's Arnold Schwarzenegger's stunt double, and for part of that reason, Arnold Schwarzenegger actually saw this movie too. It's partially the reason that Stuart Gordon was recommended to direct the movie Fortress in the early '90s, which is like a science fiction action film about a prison escape. Also, apparently, Stuart Gordon wrote a script for a movie called Berserker. That would have been
Berserker.
Yeah. The script is for you,
Just say-
Arnold Berserker. Which unfortunately,
Did he just write making fun?
did you just write the first visual pun? Which they unfortunately didn't get off the ground, but that's an interesting story. I think one of the writers of like the Sonic movie has a podcast talking about like unmade films, and they talk about that one. It's real good, along with another one on other unproduced Stuart Gordon films. But yes, and also apparently during that screening, or as a result of that, they went. Arnold had brought a bunch of his friends to see the film, and they all pile into this elevator with a secretary for Full Moon, who was the company that produces Charlie Band's Full Moon, or Empire at this point. And Arnold looks, and the secretary, who's just like forced in the back, nobody really noticed her until they'd already started moving. He looks at her, and then he says, "Let's get naked." just to mess with her, which is so funny. What a weird person. He just smiles and says, "Let's strip." So the intestines, I think those are really cool. The way they do the intestine scene, it's cool that you have a tentacle monster in your Lovecraft thing. That seems appropriate. It's pretty well done, all things considered. Pretty gooey. That's maybe my like effects highlight. There's so much cool stuff going on at the end, and everything with Dr. Hill, because they made like a bunch of different heads for him. Like one's an animatronic, one's like a false one. Apparently, you'll notice throughout the whole movie he's wearing a crummy wig, and that's because they couldn't style any of the dummy heads to match his actual hair. So they're just have him wear a wig, and then we'll put the wig on the dummies as needed, which is cool. That's actually pretty thoughtful and clever in terms of how to figure that logistical hurdle out. Even if it does, like, I don't know, Dr. Hill seems like the kind of guy who would wear a bad wig, so it's appropriate.
The ending's heartbreaking. I didn't like that she died.
Or like fart breaking.
Like,
what were they thinking?
overcome. What were they thinking? Herbert West is an idiot. Re-Animator, more like Re-Animator, dog shit. So the ending's really heartbreaking, and I think it's like I found the bit of Dan overcome with grief, deciding to interject Barbara with the Re-Animator, the Reanigen, even though it's kind of heavily implied that it's torture for everyone other than Dr. Hill, to be kind of like powerful. Kind of like just very briefly at the end, it kind of hits you with a grief can make you do things you know you shouldn't do out of just, pure sorrow. I don't know. What do you guys think of that?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting note to end this first one on, especially because it's sort of a bookend. At the beginning, you have him like trying to revive the person, and his superior is just like, this is your dedication is heartwarming, but a good doctor knows when to call it. And in this moment, he kind of has to know when to call it. But then when everybody leaves, he's like, "I'm gonna try one more thing." And that's not a great thing to do, but it's just like I love my girlfriend, and I have to try.
Yeah. It's a fucked up, selfish decision, and I'm hard pressed to say I would have done differently in his shoes.
Yeah.
It's the Last of Us dilemma again.
I was literally thinking it's like just what happened at the end of Last of Us. fucked up, horrible, selfish. I get it.
Yeah, no, I think the ending to this one is pretty good. Yeah, pretty fairly potent. Like it's kind of what you'd expect, but in a way for this kind of horror film, and the way it's going, but not in a bad way at all. On a side note, discussing briefly prior to the character's Megan's death, the Lord. Initially in production, because those zombies are pretty naked, and if you look close, you can see a little bit of something going on there. Originally, they were going to have merkins, which are for like a stage performance. It's basically just like a pubic wreath that covers you up. But they'd pitched them. They'd thrown them all away early in production. For whatever reason, they just didn't think they would need them. So they just ultimately ended up spray painting down there black, pretty much.
Yeah, one of those zombies is swinging a big doll.
Yes.
I'll be real.
Yes, yeah. You can see it in the finished work.
Man, I guess the version that was uploaded to the streaming service with the 6 1-minute ads near the end
Was not the highest
didn't
quality.
have the highest quality version.
Yeah, I wonder.
So I missed the dongs.
The other thing that's
It's a shame. If I saw Big Schlong, immediate 6 out of 5.
There we go.
the other thing it's worth noting is the actress, the doctor who tells Dan to give up at the beginning and end of the film.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually Carolyn Purdy Gordon. Carolyn Purdy Gordon. Good Lord. That's Stuart Gordon's wife. She's in she's in his next few films as well, and she was also in Bleacher Bums. She was also in his all-nude version of Peter Pan, and was a regular in the Organic Theater Company.
That was something that Joe Bob brought up as well. That like it was she is in like all of his movies, and after this one, he just kills her off in all of his movies.
Yeah, I was reading about it on his Wikipedia page, and apparently like everyone except this one, his wife dies in. Much to think
Not in
about.
Robot Jocks, which you'd know if you watched Robot Jocks and enjoyed the Giant Robot FM history.
And listen to the pod.
All right. Whatever. Diagnosis boy.
You're like no, I'm going for Thunderbirds. You know.
No, not at all. No, that doesn't track in the slightest.
Thunderbirds.
Oh,
Is that the
I was also
puppet
going
one?
to say, yeah, this is like Frankenstein meets the Great Gatsby, because it's got a perspective character, and our Great Gatsby is Herbert, kind of, sort of. There's a place in which that metaphor works. The only other thing is because we were supposed to have a trivia corner, and then I ended up peppering it throughout. Is this particular work, Re-Animator, was released in Japan, and of course it has a manga adaptation in the pages of Monthly Halloween. It was apparently quite popular. It's one of the few that was adapted like to completion. Usually they're kind of like teasers, like The Return of the Living Dead only covers to like when the zombies are trying to break in, but they also did adaptations of particularly Nightmare on Elm Street is the one that jumps to mind, and I think they did Day of the Dead as well. But Re-Animator they did to completion.
And those are all shoujo, aren't they?
Yes, yeah. Monthly Halloween is a shoujo magazine. It's directed at women, which is probably why this Fujoshi story really caught their attention.
Yeah.
Which deeply funny. It's one of the few that gets like a full color spread too in front of it. Deeply amusing. They draw Herbert West like Chwink Columbo kind of, and
Let's fucking go.
It's really good. I actually did some cleanup work and put the 2 pages together on my Twitter account. But it is a really nice piece, and it's a really fun little manga adaptation. And Tanner looks like he has something to say. What's up, Tanner?
You guys know they made a Thunderbirds movie in
Yep, it's
2004 that stars Bill Paxton?
Really bad.
Did not know
Not
this.
good.
Sorry. I went down on a Thunderbird kick because I was like, that's the Puppets one, right? Sorry. I'm so sorry.
No, you're fine. A couple other pieces of trivia is the art direction for this was done by Robert A. Burns, who also did production design on The Hills Have Eyes and Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which is pretty notable. Apparently, Gordon got a bunch of photographs of a morgue for him to do sort of the set design. Cook County morgue, I believe. And he gave them to Burns, and then he went back and was like, so what do you have for me? And then Burns just handed him back his photos and said, yep, here it is. And he was like, do you have any sketches or any like concepts? I don't draw. He did a good job, mostly pretty good job. I do think the desk immediately in front of the morgue, like the dissection room, such as it were, cold storage, the very kind of warm looking cold storage, well, is maybe a little out of place, but otherwise I feel like it's pretty solid. But it's kind of notable that somebody of that significance worked on this production, for a first time director and that sort of thing, and I think he did a pretty good job on this one. Also, apparently the nightstick, the glow stick. That's it. I was conflating terms. The glow stick fluid that they used to fill for the syringes, extremely toxic. They were not supposed to get it on themselves, and they kept getting it on themselves at the entire production. That owns.
Did anyone get cancer from that?
No, this isn't like the Conqueror situation where.
That's like Conqueror's the movie where. One, that's John Wayne doing the most racist thing he ever did somehow.
I don't think so, because he does play Genghis Khan. And I did say Genghis on purpose as a bit. But he does play Genghis Khan, but he just plays him as John Wayne, which is actually really funny.
It's not a good movie, though.
It's cheeks, but it's pretty funny.
Didn't John Wayne get cancer from it even? Or was it just everyone
allegedly.
else?
Like, it's hard to prove, but yes, it was on, like, a nuclear test site. Or dumping ground, I think? Waste site? Waste disposal.
Fun fact, the next Bomb Squad production short film is being filmed at that creek in St. Louis where they dumped all the radioactive waste.
Mm.
We're gonna reanimate ourselves.
The Legend of Boggy Creek. Tanner Richard Kraft.
You guys ever like some like radioactive metals look like you could bite into them? You ever see like plutonium? It looks kind of yummy.
Yeah, you should do that. Anyways.
Well, I don't think it would end well. I thought this just came to my head. The hallway that leads to the morgue is very funny to me. I don't know why. There's this big empty hallway.
Yeah, it's fair. It's kind of amusing. Allegedly, the film, the original cinematographer who did shoot the initial scenes in the house, was fired and replaced by Mac Ahlberg, who I think does an exemplary job. I don't quite understand the complaints about the scenes in the house being too dark. Was I think Charlie Van's big issue with it. But
Dude,
yeah, I think.
Watch a movie made in the last 5 years. You will never complain about an 80s movie being too dark again.
Yeah.
I was trying to watch, I watched the new Brad Pitt, George Clooney movie, Wolves. Wolves. It's hard to say because it's wolf, but like with an S, but it's not wolves. Anyway, I watched that when I was at home on Monday, so I was watching it during the day with the sun still sort of on that side of my TV. It was impossible to see the first 30, 20 minutes of the movie because it was in a dark room, and we don't have to light scenes anymore because of digital cameras.
Yeah.
Return to film. My point being is that, yes, there are some scenes in this movie that are a little dark, but God, we didn't know how good we had it.
I can see everything that's happening at any given point.
Yeah.
That's more than I can say for blockbusters in theaters right now.
Yeah.
Blockbusters aren't in theaters. They're the place where you get movies, where you rent.
They're in Oregon.
Yeah.
That's true.
Is it still?
The last one.
We've got to destroy it. Blockbuster was bad, and Blockbuster was stinko. Let's be real here.
It was.
It
was. They all were, but it's there's a fondness. There's a Redbox is going out of business.
Redbox? I can get bread?
Yeah.
From the grocery store?
Red.
That's insane.
What are bread boxes for?
For the bread, dum-dum. Come on.
Hold your bread.
But the bread comes in a thing already.
It used to not do that.
Then why do they still sell them?
Keeps them fresh.
For people who bake their own bread. Tanner, you own a Funko Pop shelf. You've never baked bread in your life.
I've baked
bread. I've seen.
If by
but baked.
No,
I've seen your homemade cookies where you just dole out the dough from the Toll House tub.
Hey,
you little freak!
Hey!
Don't you dare!
I've I've managed to fuck that up.
Yes,
before,
I do
so.
remember you did manage to mess that up somehow. Christ almighty. I did just want to mention that this movie very prominently in its opening features a Talking Heads poster, and also prominently features a Talking Heads, and also that the theme song sounds like the theme to Psycho, as performed by Danny Elfman.
And I just got back from seeing Stop Making Sense, the Talking
Oh,
Heads.
so that's why you stopped making
True
sense.
story.
You took the lesson to heart. I like Tom Tom Club. Genius of Love is a good song.
Same as it ever was. Same as it ever was.
Did you like Genius of Love, Tanner?
I loved everything. I mean, I like Talking Heads.
Well, it's not a Talking Heads song, Tanner. Did you not?
Wait, what are we talking
The
about?
Tom Tom Club, Genius of Love, when they introduce Tom Tom Club and say they're going to perform Genius of Love in the movie Stop Making Sense that you just watched. It features members of the Talking Heads.
Oh, yeah. That was like one of the best bits of the movie. Sorry, I got so confused there.
Correct, yes.
Because for a second there, I was like, does he mean Power of Love? No. Huey Lewis in the news?
No, I don't really like that song.
Don't need money. Don't need fame.
Why are you doing the Addams
was
Family? Do. Don't need money.
Need money.
Don't need fame.
Don't need fame.
Okay, this bit's over. Final thoughts.
We're gonna have to reanimate Tanner.
Re-Animator.
Yeah, I'm dying, sorry. Animator, why I hardly even.
Take a long walk off a short.
She on my animate till I Ethan wants to kill me. He wants to kill me right now. I can sense it.
Jesus Christ.
Sorry, give me a second.
Remarkably, that did not stop my recording. It's still going. Holy
I
shit.
needed the extremely loud and correct buzzer, Tanner.
Oh,
It's the greatest episode of the show ever.
That was good.
Final thoughts. Tanner.
You go first. I love Stop Making Sense. No. Re-Animator's a gay old time.
Gale time?
And a great time.
Yeah, I would say so. Correct. Tim, final thoughts?
Yeah, Re-Animator. It's very good. If you have a chance to see it on a big screen with a crowd, I would definitely recommend it. It's a great time to hoot and to holler. It is like one of those like perfect balances of horror and comedy. Like you got to get the balance just right, and this movie absolutely does. So definitely check it out this spooky season. Back to you, Ethan.
Yeah, I think that it is a really good movie, especially to see with a crowd, if you're able to. I really enjoyed it. I got to see it at Tivoli before they closed at a midnight show, which was a lot of fun. It does really hit that perfect balance of people laughing at both the inopportune times because it's like a little uncomfortable. It's kind of surprising what they do manage to get away with. I feel like even after being desensitized to some stuff, it's like that's pretty cool that that's in there, but it doesn't feel like it manages to avoid feeling like super gross in a way, like in a way of like that the head giving head scene. It feels like it's very in on the bit. Like if that was a straightforward kind of horror bit, I mean, it would feel out of place for one thing. But I could see a different sort of horror director doing something like that and it not working out. I think it's a really remarkable first effort too. Gordon did a lot of work on it, doing like storyboards for the effect sequences and that sort of thing himself. And he did a lot of work with the actors. He did like rehearsals before shooting, which is relatively rare for at this point in time in particular. And I think it really shows. I think that the result is that the actors get incredible performances. Like his energy is sort of carried throughout the entire film. I think Mac Allberg, I believe, said that it had been a while since he was on a movie that made him feel so invigorated, so reanimated, even. It's a great picture. I highly recommend it, especially if you're trysting with a bubble-headed co-ed. But you know who else is a bubble-headed co-ed?
Me.
You. The person watching/listening to this episode of Bomb Squad Matinee. Just a reminder to like, subscribe, leave a comment to boost us in the algorithm. Check out the version on Spotify when that comes out, if you're able to, if you prefer audio-based platforms as well. And also on any podcatcher of choice, be sure to leave a high rating. And give us a little bit of cash on Patreon if you're able to.
Well, if you subscribe to our $5 tier, you can get access to commentary tracks. The Sonic one is either... Have I released the Sonic one yet? It's either... It'll be out by the time this comes out. And, actually, I'm publishing it right now. And, so the $5 tier gets you access to commentary tracks, and the $10 tier gives you a shout-out. Two people who want to shout out. Jason Secord, thank you so much for contributing to our Patreon. And Tanya Kraft, my mom, thank you so much for subscribing to the $10 tier. You can get a shout-out, too, if you subscribe to that tier.
Farewell. Have a good one. Enjoy your Devilman Yowie in Re-Animator. Take care.
Slid my ticket across the table and I said, "Sorry guys, I gotta see about a girl."